Hey, and welcome to this lesson where we're going to wrap up development for our Mars Marine game. We're going to start this lesson by removing the debug lines from our line trace. Then we're going to spawn some impact particle effects wherever our line traces collide. So let's get started by heading inside our Marine blueprint. Whenever we start firing our weapon trace function executes. So inside this function, we have this line trace by channel function. We have the draw debug type set to for duration. We're going to change this to none to remove the debug lines. Now to spawn some impact hit effects, we're going to want to spawn a particle whenever we know that the trace has hit something. And we can tell if the line trace has hit anything by making use of the blocking hit from the hit result with a branch. And we're already doing this here. So we're going to want to insert a function around here. We're going to create a function for spawning the impact hit at a particular location in the world. And you'll notice on the hit result we have a world location, so we're going to make use of this too inside our function. But I want you to create the function. Create a new function named spawn impact hit. This function is going to need a vector input parameter. This will be used for providing the trace hit location, and inside this function we want to spawn a particle at a location, so call the spawn emitter at location function. The emitter we want to spawn is the assault rifle impact hit from the effects folder that's provided with the content in our project. For the spawn location, make use of the hit location input parameter. Then once you've created this function, call it whenever the weapon line trace hits anything, and make sure to provide the hit location from the trace hit result for the input on your function. Okay, so this is your first challenge for this lesson. Pause here to create a function for spawning the impact hit. Okay, so I hope you had a go at this. You should now have a function named spawn impact hit inside your Marine Blueprint class. This function should have a vector input. I've named it hit location. It could be hit location or spawn location, but we use this vector input parameter as the location where we spawn our emitter. And the emitter is the assault rifle impact hit. We can see when we drop this down, it's just around the fourth one down here. Okay, so inside our weapon trace function, we're going to call this spawn impact hit. We want to call it after we have a blocking hit on the trace. So it's going to be after the true output of the branch here. So we can call it before or after the apply damage function. I'm going to put it on the end of this code here. And the hit location is going to be the location from our hit result from the line trace. And we can just neaten this up a bit by double clicking on these wires. Okay, so now anytime we do a line trace, if it hits anything in the world, we spawn our impact hit in the world as well. So let's hit compile and save, and let's come back to the level to try this. So if I shoot at these rocks, we can see the impact hit, and once the aliens come, the impact hit should spawn on the aliens as well, which should be any second. There we go. Okay, cool. So for the second half of this lesson, we're going to spend some time setting up a health pickup because the player should be able to replenish their health. Now, in order for this to work, the Marine Blueprint class is going to need a function to add health. Once we have this, we can start setting up a health pickup blueprint class. When the player overlaps the health pickup, it should call the add health function, and then it will destroy the actor and remove itself from the level to represent the player collecting the pickup. But we want to make sure to only allow the player to collect the health pickup if the player's health is not already full. So let's take a look at doing this. Inside our Marine Blueprint, let's create a new function named add health. To add health to the Marine, we're going to come to the player properties category under the variables, and we're going to get the player's health. We're going to drag out the health and put in the plus symbol to get the float plus float. So we're going to get the health, and we're going to add it by a value, and we're going to drag out the second pin here and drop it onto the input entry function node here to create a new input parameter. We're going to name this health to add. So whenever this is executed, we get the health and then we add to it. We need to clamp the health. We can clamp it between 0 and the maximum health, which is going to be 100. And then we can grab our health variable again and just set it, and we can use the return value from the clamp. And let's just make sure we hook up our execution pin. And this is our add health function complete. We can hit compile and save. Now there's one more function we need to create. Let's create a new function again, and let's name this one is health full. This function is going to be a pure const function. We're simply going to get the health and see if it's equal to 100. And then we're going to add our return node, and we can drag and drop the result onto the return node here. So this function returns if our health is full or not. Now we're ready to set up our health pickup class. Let's hit compile and save in the Marine blueprint, and let's come back to the content browser. Let's come to the blueprints folder, and let's create a new folder called pickups. Inside this folder, we're going to create a new blueprint class, which is going to be an actor, and this is going to be named BP_health pickup. Now let's double click on our health pickup to open it. Inside our project, we have a health mesh asset that's set up as a particle. It automatically spins and it has a color applied to it. Now we're going to use this particle for our health pickup. So we're going to add a new particle system component, and this is going to be named health particle. And it's also going to be the root component, so we can click and drag and drop it on the default scene root to remove the default scene root and make the health particle the root component. Now we can drop down the particle template, which is the particle asset we want to assign to this, and we can just type and search for health, and we can get the P_health particle system. So here we have a spinning health mesh asset. Now we're going to add a sphere collider around the mesh. So let's add a new sphere collision component, and this is going to be called collision component. And we can just move it up so it surrounds the health particle. Okay, great. So these are all the components we need for our health pickup. Now I want you to set up the code for this class. Whenever any actor overlaps the health pickup, cast to see if the actor is the Marine blueprint. If it is the Marine, find out if the Marine's health is full. If the Marine's health is not full, add health to the Marine and then destroy the health pickup. So pause here and have a go at coding the health pickup class. Okay, so I hope you had a go at setting up your health pickup. We have the event actor begin overlap. So whenever any actor overlaps the health pickup, we check to see if it's the Marine by casting to the Marine blueprint. Then we check to see if the Marine's health is not full. So we get the isHealth function and use the not boolean with this, and then we use the branch. So if the health is not full, we will execute the true output, and then we can add health to the Marine. Once health is added, we then destroy the health pickup. So it's pretty simple. Okay, so this is our health pickup complete. We can close this, we can close the Marine blueprint, and we can drag some health pickups into our level. So let's just add a handful, and let's hit play, and let's test this out. So I'm going to wait till some aliens come up and attack me and decrease my health a bit, and then I'll pick up my health. So our health is decreased. Now if I go pick up some health over here, we can see that it restores the health. So you'll notice that my health pickup actually has a health variable here that I set up. So this is just so I don't have to hard code in any value into this function. We just have a health pickup amount for our pickup class. Awesome, so this is our health pickup complete, and we also spawn some impact hits whenever our trace hits anything. Now in the next lesson, we're going to take a look at setting up the boundary that a player can't escape from. So once you're ready, I'll see you in the next lesson. Hey, and welcome to this final lesson for the Mars Marine section. Now in this lesson, we're going to cover creating a system that restricts the player to a particular play area. If the player leaves the mission area, a warning will be displayed, and if the player doesn't return to the mission area, the player will be killed. So where do we get started with this? Well, first we're going to set up the warning text that we're going to display if the player leaves the mission area. Let's come to the UI folder in the content browser, and let's open up the player HUD. Now let's come to the palette, and let's drag in a text block onto the canvas. We're going to place this just above the center of the canvas. Let's set the anchor point to the center of the canvas. And let's just scale the text block up a bit so we can see the center of these two circles kind of line up with the anchor point. And let's change the appearance of the text block. Inside the appearance category on the details panel, we can change the justification so the text is centered. Now we want the text to look like a warning, so let's change the text color to red. We can just bring down the green and the blue values here to make it fully red. Okay, now let's change the text that's displayed. Let's write a message all in capitals, something like warning, imminent death, and we can press shift and enter to start a new line, and we can enter something like return to the mission area. Now when we hit enter, we can see our text displayed here. So this looks okay, but at the moment when we play the game, this is going to be visible. With the text selected, on the details panel, we can scroll all the way down and we can change the text visibility. Let's change it to hidden for now. We'll come back to this shortly. We can hit compile and save, and we can come back to our level. Our next step is to set up a variable inside the Marine blueprint that stores if the player is inside the mission area. Let's come to our Marine blueprint and let's create a new variable, and we can just name this outside mission area. And we want to make sure that it's a Boolean, and we want to make sure that if we compile, the default value is set to false. Okay, that's all we need to do in our Marine blueprint. We can save it and we can close it. And where we set the visibility inside our player HUD, we can create a new binding. Let's change the name of the function that gets created for the binding to something like set mission area warning visibility. We're going to change the mission area warning visibility depending on if the player is in the mission area. To do this, we are going to get our Marine blueprint. So we have the reference for the Marine here. We can get the outside mission area variable we just created. Now, how do we change the visibility drop down here? We can see there's lots of different selections. How do we change this depending on the result of this Boolean? Well, we can drag out the input pin here and we can type in select, and we can use the select node. We can see we have two options here and we have this thing named index. Let's plug our outside mission area Boolean into the index. The select node simply allows us to change the selection depending on the variable. So if the outside mission area is true, the mission area warning will be visible, but if it's false, we can set it to hidden. Okay, and that's our binding set up. It's going to toggle the visibility of our mission area warning depending on if the player is inside the mission area. So we can hit compile and save, and we can close this widget. Okay, so we now have a variable that stores if the player is outside the mission area, and the HUD is going to reflect this. Now I want you to create a custom volume that we can use for our mission area. Pause here and create a new blueprint actor. Name it BP Mission Area Volume. Add a box collision component to the volume, then set up the event graph for this actor. Whenever the player overlaps the actor, set the outside mission area variable within the Marine blueprint to false. This would mean that whenever the player enters this volume, they are within the mission area. Then once the player ends an overlap with this actor, set the outside mission area to true. This would represent the player leaving the mission area. So pause here to create your mission area volume, and then we'll take a look at triggering the player's death if the player stays outside the mission area for too long. Okay, so I hope you had a go at this. I now have a new blueprint actor named BP Mission Area Volume. Inside this actor, I've just added a box collision component to use as the trigger for the volume. Inside the event graph, when anything leaves or enters the volume, we check to see if it's the Marine. If the Marine enters the mission area, we set the outside mission area variable within the Marine blueprint to false. And if the Marine leaves the mission area, we set it to true. Now let's test this out. We can come back to our level, we can drag out our volume, and we can scale it up so it covers the level. We probably want to make sure that the alien spawn points are outside of it, and we want to make sure that the player start is within this volume. Now once we've scaled up the volume, we can hit play, and if we try leaving the mission area now, a warning should get displayed telling us to return to the mission area, which it does. When we return to the mission area, the warning goes away. But of course, if we leave the mission area and stay out of the mission area for too long, the player doesn't actually die yet. So let's fix this. Let's come back to our mission area volume blueprint. And let's create a new function called kill player. When this function is called, we're simply going to get the player character, and we are going to apply damage to the player. We're going to apply 100 damage to the player to kill them. Okay, now how do we call this function? Well, we're going to call it on a timer. Whenever the player leaves the mission area, we can set a timer by function name. The function name is going to be kill player. And how long do we want to wait until the player dies outside the mission area? We can promote the time to a variable, and we can call this seconds before player death. This can be compiled, so we can set the default value. I'm going to choose 5 seconds for this. So whenever the player leaves the mission area and they're outside it for 5 seconds, the kill player function will execute. But if the player returns into the mission area, we want to clear the timer. So let's make sure that we call the clear timer by function name. And the function name is going to be kill player. So whenever the player returns to the mission area, we clear the timer. Okay, that's all we need to do in our volume. We can hit compile and save, and we can come back to our level and hit play. So if we leave the mission area now and stay outside of it for too long, the player should now die. Okay, so that brings us to the end of Mars Marine. You've now completed this section, but there's still a lot more that you could add to this. There's so many more things that could be added to this game to flesh it out more. You could fade the camera out when the player dies, and then restart the level or open a different level. You could create your own unique pickups for the player, different types of levels and aliens, different weapons, power-ups, abilities, game modes, the list goes on. But why not head over to the Game Dev TV community forum and team up with a few fellow students to keep developing your game? If there's one thing I want you to take away from this section, it's the use of pure const and impure functions. By writing good readable code that's collapsed down into these functions, you can hide all the messy details and easily understand your code from the top level. We've created a few variables and functions across our classes. Just make sure that these have good names that describe them, and take some time to organize them into categories. So that's the end of this section. I hope you've had fun with it and that you feel like you have a game that you can continue developing. When you're happy with your game, remember, you can always package it to share with your friends.